Evening, Joey.
Hello.
Anyone who is online right now listening would like to make any comments, please start adding those comments into the file at this time, as those public comments will be the first thing on the agenda. Thank you very much. Anyone who is online tonight listening to us, if you have any comments that you'd like to make or concerns, please put them as a post on the chat room now, as those will be the first thing we will take up as soon as we open this meeting in approximately 1 to 2 minutes. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion before we get started that Scott has to remove that Dallas Cowboys bandana. It's offensive to me, and I don't know if I can handle it for 2 hours.
Motion fails for lack of second.
Good one.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock tonight. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. I'm going to start with a roll call vote. Mr. Lewis?
Weber.
Here.
Nystrom.
We think she's here.
Here.
Teben.
Here.
Pritchard. Here. Mulhouse.
Here. Okay, I would just like to welcome everyone to the meeting, both here in person and online. If you are online, if you could please, you have any comments to make, please add them to the chat room right now, as it's the first thing we'll be taking up is any public comments. First, I'd just like to make an opening statement. We're here to make some tough decisions tonight, secondary to what's happening in the United States and in the world with the COVID-19 crisis. No matter what this board decides tonight, not everyone's going to be happy. But we have to work together as a team to do the best for our students, to provide them the best education possible. I'd like to start by thanking our administration for all their diligent hard work they've done on this project. Also, We've had numerous teachers come in and help participate in think groups and other projects. Most of that has been on their own time during their summer vacation. I'd like to thank them very much too for helping participate. I would also like to thank the everyone who participated in our 2 public surveys. I've been on this board for 7 years now, and usually if we got 200 to 250 positive responses, we were happy. Now, this time, we had 75% response on our last survey. So I appreciate all the public input. It just shows how much our public community cares about this decision. The board here tonight, unfortunately, we have to set aside our personal emotional feelings on this. We have to make decisions based on sound science and instructional theory. This is an emotional topic for everyone, but the board has a responsibility to look at the sound science and instructional theory for what is best for our students, and also to keep our faculty and staff safe. With that being said, the one last thing I'd like to say is, whatever we decide tonight, it might change. COVID has been so fluid that we make one decision and then 2 weeks later, either the scientists come out with a different theory, State Department of Public Health comes out with something different, State Department of Education comes out with something different, or we might get into this 2 or 3 days and find that the practicality is not the same as what our dream theory had been when we enacted these policies. So we're going to be probably making some changes on the fly. In fact, I know we will be having to make some changes. With that said, I am going to open up the floor for public comments. As in all of our board meetings, the first part of our meeting is open for public comments. I will first accept public comments from anyone here in our auditorium tonight. If you have any comments, please step forward to the computer at the end of the middle aisle. Okay. Seeing no further comments here in the auditorium, we have one comment on the chat room right now. And this comment is from a parent who is concerned about how PE will be handled and will students be expected to run with masks on. I think that's a detailed question that we are not going to be able to provide the exact answer for tonight. I'll defer that to the principals and the phys ed teachers once we get everything else established. Hearing that, I do not see any other comments here in public or on our chat room. So we're going to proceed with the next item on the agenda, which is our Return to Learn project. What is going to happen is Mrs. Tripa, our superintendent, is going to make a presentation for the next 15 to 30 minutes. After that, the board will have a discussion. We'll be asking any questions or concerns we have with administration through our superintendent. And then at the end of that discussion, each board member will be allowed to make some closing comments, and then we will entertain a motion for our final proposal. The other thing I will say is that the board has received several emails and phone calls. We take those all into account along with our surveys and what our administrative recommendations are. So with that, I will turn everything over to Ms. Trupa.
We'll start with the plan on Return to Learn, the 2 on-campus models that we are going to be deciding upon tonight. So we're sharing both in person and then also online so that you can see, hopefully, this should not be a surprise. We hope that you've had an opportunity to see these different on-campus models. But what we're deciding between tonight would be an on-site model where it would follow a traditional schedule in each building. Our face coverings would be required. We'd have additional mitigation strategies. We would be staying in cohorts as much as possible. That would vary by level at this point. And our parents are expected to monitor student health daily from home so that they don't arrive to school ill. The hybrid model would be the second on-campus model that we're considering. And that would be a situation where we're able to restrict the numbers of students in a building by taking families and utilizing approximately 50%. It would not be exactly 50% of our student body on campus on an A day, for example, and then B day, the rest of the students would be on campus while the other A students were off campus. A-B format would simply mean that the students would be on campus every other day and learning from home on the days that they aren't on campus. When they are on campus, the same procedures and rules that we would have if we were on an on-site model would apply. Face coverings would be required. We would still have the social distancing and physical barriers that we're going to be utilizing on an on-site model. Essentially, the difference would be the amount of time each student would be on campus. With either model, we are offering an online learning option to our families. So regardless of the decision tonight, families have the opportunity to register for the online option. I know there have been some questions about how to get registered. We have sent out some links and we'll be sending them out again tomorrow to make sure that you have registered officially for the online option. We did send out surveys that asked for whether you would prefer that option. That was not the registration. There is a registration link and that will be posted on our website and again sent out tomorrow. And then our deadline for online registration will be August 7th because we need to be able to have time to staff the online option based on the needs of our families. So families have been able to sign up. We've had people signing up already for online, but that possibility still exists for the rest of this week. I'm going to have us go to the surveys next, I think. So I'd like to share, we'll start with the first survey just to remind everyone what that looked like. We did send this data out publicly into the Torador Times. This is the one that we put out to our public and to our staff on July 2nd. And you will see that for our overall responses with regard to families, we had a total of 1,489 responses. This is the survey that allowed families to choose fully online, fully in person, or hybrid. So the hybrid and fully in person are the two on-campus models that we're deciding upon as a district tonight. You can see that as the community, 49.2% had stated at that time on July 2nd that they would prefer an in-person model where their students are attending on-site every day. And 35.2% of the families noted that they would prefer a hybrid model where their students were, at the time that we did this survey, we were thinking it would be 2 days in, a day off, and 2 days out, but in essence, a hybrid model. The staff survey with the same questions, you can see that our staff, 43.9%, or that was high school, I'm sorry, 46.3% of our staff as a whole preferred the in-person model for our students, and 40.5% preferred the hybrid model. And you can see on this document how staff members noted their preference by building as well. Then we asked a week later for our families and staff to do a follow-up survey. And we've had several questions as to why we didn't ask for people's opinions with regard to in-person or hybrid on the second survey. And that is simply because we knew that it was not something that we would be able to have a choice for our families to choose in person or hybrid, that would be determined at the district level. And in order to get an idea of the staffing needs that we would have and logistical information that we would need to have prepared, we needed to know how many families would choose online or in person, regardless of the model of whether it was fully in person or hybrid, because we felt that having the information from the week prior told us where our families and our staff were with regard to the hybrid model. So our second survey data, we had not been able to share publicly, so I'm happy that we're able to do that tonight. As you can see, the second survey, we had 1,423 total responses from families. We have a total of 2,030 students. So that's 607 students that are not accounted for on this survey. But of the survey responses that were received, whether families preferred fully online or some sort of in-person model, you can see that 72.8% preferred their students to be on campus at some level versus 25.8% that wish to be fully online. And then our staff, we asked the same information of, and 80% of the staff preferred some sort of in-person model compared to fully online at 17%. So that information is information that we've been utilizing to develop our in-person plan, our hybrid plan, as well as solidifying our online option that's available regardless of the on-campus option we move toward. That information was extremely vital, and we're grateful to our community and our staff for being very engaged in this process, and also helps us with knowing what families and staff feel is best for our students in our district. And then another component that we just recently received was the DE guidance with regard to at what point our state Iowa Department of Public Health would recommend we be on site or in hybrid or fully online. And upon receiving that guidance, that's something else that we have been taking into consideration. We received that last week. There are still some questions with that. We have been told that a Q&A is coming with regard to that guidance. Essentially, the guidance states that from 0 to 5% community spread, that's minimal. I don't know how they describe it without looking right at it, but it's minimal threat. I don't remember what the terminology is they use, but they then move from 6 to, and they recommend on-site in the DE recommendation for 6 to 14%. They still recommend on-site, but they consider that mild to moderate. And when we talk about the percentile of community spread, that's on a 14-day rolling average. And that's for every school district is to look at their local context. So for us, that would be the Boone County Health Department's information with regard to our 14-day rolling percentage for community spread. At 15%, that is when the Department of Education recommended a hybrid model. And then at the same time, if we have 15% community spread as well as 10% student absenteeism due to illness, they will allow us to apply for a 2-week waiver for online instruction. And the Department of Education has stated that we need 48 hours, that they will take up to 48 hours to give us a response so that we know whether we've been given permission to move into that fully online model. And at 20% community spread, we also have the opportunity to reach out to our Department of Ed, as well as our Department of Public Health and our local health department to request fully online as well. So that's the guidance that has been going alongside the other information that we've received from the Department of Education, and as well as our surveys that we've had from the community. As educators, we are not medical professionals, and so we have to rely on the medical professionals to provide us with the guidance as to what would be appropriate medically. Before COVID, we have always followed the public health guidance with regard to other illnesses that may occur in schools, such as whooping cough, or that's the one that comes to mind the most. But other illnesses, that's something that has always been part of the process, so that will remain the case with COVID-19. We do know education, and we do feel that students do learn best when we can have them present with us. But we also feel that parents know best what's best for their child. And so that is why our online model is available with either on-site, on-campus choice. As a administrative team and myself as the superintendent, what I recommend to the board is that we consider the community and staff survey information as we make this decision. Both staff and community have stated that the on-site option is preferable. And we would also recommend that we follow the guidelines that have been put forward by the Iowa Department of Public Health and the Department of Education as well. So that would be where our administrative team has landed with regard to the information that we have received from our staff and community and the guidance from our state.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Tripa, I would just like to ask you to explain to everyone what the expectations will be as far as the online full-time and the hybrid online days would be, as far as supervision, the amount of time the kids are going to have to be signed on to the computer, attendance checks, those type of things. If you can just give a little summary so people fully understand
Sure.
those issues.
So the online option that families may choose does require students to be physically online approximately 3 hours over the course of the day. When that will be determined by the classroom teacher in charge of that online class as well, or maybe it's the subject area, depending on the level that you're talking about. We did put forward to our families and on Facebook sample days of what the online might look like. So I would encourage anyone who hasn't seen that to go back to our Facebook page and look at sample schedules from each of the levels as to what that online piece might look like. We had asked on those surveys what sort of assistance might be available to students that might be choosing the online option, because it will require adult assistance in most cases, as well, to assist the student in their studies. They will be taking attendance in the online option. It's required work. Everything will be graded. The intent behind the online option is that we would be able to have them keeping pace with this in similar fashion to those that are on site. And if someone were to need to quarantine from the on-site model, that they would be able to utilize the on-site or the online temporarily during a quarantine which means that they would need to be closely aligned to the classroom. So that will be, they will be keeping that same pace. It's not self-pacing. The hybrid model is a little different because our teachers that are teaching on site, if they are also in the hybrid model, they have to teach both on site and online. So the hybrid model will likely have more asynchronous learning. So in other words, it won't be live necessarily. They might have videos that they're watching that have been prepared by their teachers. There will be activities for them to complete. There will be there will be instruction that they will have to follow, but it will not be as live as the online model, for lack of a better way to state it, because the hybrid model, when they're off-site, that will vary greatly by the level and by what might be happening in the classroom. But the online model very much will look very similar to the classroom, only they are at home online.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to open the discussion to the board members.
Brian, you're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. I'm going to open the conversation now to the board members for discussion and comments, questions for our superintendent here. And then we'll all give some closing comments. So, questions from board members right now.
I'll go first with a question. I just want to be clear, the survey number 2, did it explicitly ask, or was it explicitly stated that the option that they're choosing for on-site was hybrid or in person? Did it make them think it was fully in person, or was it clear that they were the decision would be made at a later date to choose whether it was hybrid or fully in person?
That's a great question. When we sent that survey out, we explicitly stated that the on-campus model would be decided upon by the Board of Education, and we showed both on-campus models along with that survey so they could see what those two look like. But we did not ask for the choice to be there because we were having a lot of misunderstandings with regard to being able to choose hybrid. That has never been an option for us, unfortunately, as a district, in that we just simply don't have the capacity or the staffing to provide our families with the opportunity to choose on-site fully or hybrid or online. So we did explicitly state that when they were choosing, I believe we called it on-campus model on the actual survey, so that they would see a difference between the on-site and hybrid. But that was, we did explicitly state that, but I could, as best as we could.
This is Pat. Quick question here. What if we decided to go full time? What's the plan for teachers who cannot return for a time? For those who have vulnerable family members, cancer survivors, or family members with cancer, pregnant teachers, etc.
So we have reached out to our staff early on before we even sent out surveys, to find out which staff members were in those situations, and we're working individually with those teachers that would be in those situations to see how we might be able to still utilize their expertise. And each person's situation is different, so they need to be dealt with individually. So that's how we've been handling that. And we did that prior to the survey, and then we confirmed it with the survey. We asked them to speak to if they had a very specific need because of medical reasons, so that we could be sure that we hadn't missed anyone.
This is Pam. I have a question about a hybrid model. I understand the complete needs are not universal. What a kindergartner needs versus what a high school student needs is remarkable. How creative have the hybrid model discussions been where perhaps younger students go daily and older students are on a A-B schedule.
I think we've talked about almost every possibility there could be. I think some of the concerns that we've had about having different models would be the reason for the different models. So when we're looking at safety, we have developed barriers that would accomplish in the school buildings that do not have the ability to socially distance as much as other school buildings, to try and make sure that we can have every child be as safe as possible and staff be as safe as possible. I think that that's been the largest part of our conversation. I think regardless of what the board would decide, we can make anything happen. It's just our recommendation is based on district level, because we also, while our students may also have different needs, some of the teachers, our teachers are all in a similar position. So safety for our teachers doesn't necessarily change by level. Can you see? So that we have, okay, so we have a barrier that we're developing for all of the tables or instances where we cannot socially distance the amount that we'd like to. And this is vinyl. I don't know if you can tell if it's vinyl or not, but that's what it is, and PVC pipe. And we have a sign up actually that's been going around to our community for people to help us to build these. But you can see that it extends past the table. A lot of districts are utilizing dividers that sit solely on the table, and we're going above and beyond that to make sure that there's an actual physical barrier between individuals sitting maybe at the same table. So you can still see through it. So you can still look at the same paper and maybe talk as a partner group. A teacher can come up next to a student and still have a barrier, things like that. So that's an example of how we've tried to speak to some of the challenges that we have in some of our buildings that don't allow for as much spacing as we would prefer. So when you ask how creative can we be, I think we can be as creative as you ask us to be. But I think as a group, we have felt that district-wide also is a little bit easier to move in and out of that guidance. So if we're looking at a possibility of our district being on 2 models, I think a question that we have is, and I have as superintendent, is how would you intend for us to utilize the guidance? So for example, I'll use the example that Dr. Nystrom utilized. If we happen to be a hybrid at one level and on-site for another level, what determines when one level goes to on-site and one level goes to hybrid? How does that alter how we utilize the guidance from our Department of Education would be a question that we have.
Thank you very much. Other
Ryan?
questions?
Well,
Pam,
I want to
Dr.
address
Nystrom has another question. Comment?
ask about that idea a little bit. If we have pockets of quarantine, we possibly wouldn't have them at every building. That's a consideration that crosses my mind. And so we might be able to individualize using the state's guidelines.
Can you explain further, Dr. Nystrom? I'm sorry. Can you just explain a little bit more?
Well, let's take, Page Elementary, and the incident rate for illness is 0, but, perhaps there are 2 classes of 4th grade that end up needing to be, contact traced and quarantine efforts made. And, those perhaps students and teachers have to go on to the hybrid model of online. I just wondered if that kind of individualization is possible.
So I think in cases, if we had too many illnesses, that we would probably simply not have them in school. And I do think contact tracing will determine that. I guess I was thinking more systemically with regard to our community spread with regard to the guidance. So for example, if you were to determine, again, if the secondaries at hybrid and elementaries at on-site, and we're currently sitting, for anyone who hasn't looked, currently sitting at 9.48% community spread in our area. At what point would the secondary go to on-site? And then at what point would the elementary go to hybrid? That's a question that we've had and in our conversations.
Let me just address the 14-day rolling average. There's an old saying that statistics don't lie, but statisticians lie. This number you have to take with a grain of salt. It went up about July 23rd, July 24th. It's basically the number, the numerator is the number of people in the county that have tested positive in the last 14 days. The denominator is the number of people tested. About 8-10 days ago, we ran into a shortage of test kits for patients that are asymptomatic. The government has rules that we've got 3 different ways we can test in Boone County. We can do a rapid test, we can do a test we send out to the state hygienics lab, or we can send them out to Quest, which is a reference lab. The first 2 we can only do if a patient is symptomatic. That is, they have to have a fever, cough, shortness of breath, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or being admitted to the hospital for another reason. We started running a little bit short of those, but those tests we can't use on the asymptomatic ones. The ones we use on the asymptomatic ones are the Quest ones. We ran out of those about 10 days ago because Quest hasn't been shipping as many because of the fact that they've been shipping them to California, Texas, Florida, Arizona, where they've had some major outbreaks. So because of that, in the last 10 days, we have not been able to test nearly as many kids or adults, both, as we were in the past. So there's basically been about a 3 percentage point increase in that number in the last 10 to 14 days. That's because we're not testing as many people. So when we look at these statistics, we have to take them with a grain of salt. There have been other times during this crisis that our leadership at the state level has looked at a certain number when in reality got abnormal, then they switched to a different number. So I think we have to take it with a grain of salt and do what's best for our community if we get to that point. As far as closing schools or going to online, the rules state it has to be 20% 14-day average plus, I believe it's either 10 or 20% absentee rate, 10% absentee rate in the district. Doesn't say anything about individual buildings. And then even if we get that, we have to submit a letter to the state or request to the state in order for that to happen. If we can close them down, well, if we close down and the state does not agree with us closing down and going to online, then those 2 or 3 days that we were all online won't count for the school year, and we'd have to add those 3 days on at the end of the school year. That's kind of what the penalty would be if we close down and the state doesn't allow that. So that's just a comment on that from a medical and statistical perspective. I should say that I'm also for full disclosure, I'm also chairman of the Boone County Board of Health. So I get to look at the numbers a little bit
Brian,
more
based
than most.
Brian, just based on what you just said, if we're not testing many, the number in Boone County could actually be higher than what we know.
No, it's probably the opposite, because the only ones we're not testing are the asymptomatic ones. So they already have a low probability of being positive. And so probably that number, it's 9.43, 9.48, is probably would be a little bit lower if we were allowed to test everyone coming in requesting test.
So I guess what I was just going to reiterate is that when we're making our recommendation as a district, part of that is because that allows us to move within that guidance easily. So if we go outside of that, we're just asking for direction from the board as to how to utilize that guidance so that we can be consistent. That's all we're asking.
The one concern I hear from a lot of staff at the high school that I think they would like some clarification on is a lot of people view their exposure at the high school level as greater because of the way the high school ebbs and flows. Classes mix constantly. You know, you might have 6 classes with 25 people in it throughout the day, whereas a first grade class could stay in that same 25-person cohort for the entire school day. You know, the intermixing constantly and the changing periods throughout the day seem to, you know, a teacher might have 180 students or 130 students versus a first grade teacher that might have 20 or 25 or 30. So that's why it's hard for people to justify a district-wide approach when the buildings seem to act very differently. Any insight there, I think, would put some people's minds at ease.
I think one thing to think about too, as we think about our students, yes, while we may have 20 kids in those classrooms, we think about what the size of that classroom looks like. So if we're looking at a safety, aren't necessarily those staff or kids any safer. They're in there for 7 hours together in our buildings that are relatively old. So let's think about that as well too. Our stairwells are 4 feet apart. So to get upstairs to the floor, what does that look like? They're sharing bathrooms. I don't know if you guys know how often 5-year-olds go to the bathroom. It's a lot. So they're passing each other and they're seeing each other in all those cases. So we're going to try to keep them in cohorts as much as possible, but also as they receive specialized services, things like that, those cohorts, we're going to do that to our best of our ability, but there's still going to be some intermixing, even as we keep our lunch facilities at 50%. That still means 2 classes are in lunchroom. Yeah, they're sitting 3 feet apart, but that's still, I wish it was this magical island where they kind of stayed there and they didn't intermix. And they're coming in and out of the building. Recess, we're going to try to use 2 doors, but it isn't as utopic as I think it sounds in that way. Also, 5-year-olds sometimes get lost, need to go to the nurse, their tummy hurts, those things too, and they're going to be interacting in different ways. So I just want to make sure that we're really transparent about what that can look like and what the reality of that looks like. And I also think, as I think about my staff members, they are adults and not necessarily, little kids. And so we want to make sure that if we're doing something for a safety purpose, we're doing it for all of our staff. And so that's our reasoning, if it's a safety purpose. And I think it needs to be systemic as a district for us to do that.
I also just think, if I may clarify, we have had quite a few questions after the last board meeting. There were several questions around the hybrid model, and just clarifying for that all of our staff most staff still need to report every day. They're seeing half the amount of students, but they are still coming each day. So it's half the amount of students one day, but then they see the second half the next day. So they are still exposed to the same amount of kids. It's just we might be able to employ some of the other mitigation strategies better with less kids in the building, if that makes sense. So there was a little bit of confusion in the last board meeting around, would we have to report every day? Yeah, we still need everybody on site because we got kids on site. It's just less kids at a time.
I would also interject in that all the teachers will be required to wear masks, as will all the students. So this is going to decrease the spread of the virus just because of the fact, and the risk because of the fact that everyone has masks on. They're probably going to be safer than a lot of the employees. You saw your local Walmart, Hy-Vee's, Casey's, plumbers that came into your house, electricians came into your house the last 3 months, where most of their customers were not wearing masks and they had no control over it. We will have that control. If you'll notice that most of our major retailers are going to mandatory masks. Menards, Target, Walmart, I believe Hy-Vee is, are all going to those masks to try to make everyone safe. And all these recommendations, as far as when they're on campus, it is going to be required that they wear their masks. Just from a public health standpoint, we know you're not going to get 100% compliance all the time. It's going to require some education and direction, but that's what we're here for, is education too. Other comments?
Yeah, I have.
Joey, I've not heard anything from you.
Yeah. I try to always let others talk first to try and maybe fill in some of my comments and questions before I just vomit all over everyone. Handful of different thoughts I've had while listening. Forgive me, I'm writing some of them down and just reading off my phone. So kind of wondering, like, what will the district do if students and families are failing in the online models? I'm just going to rapid fire all this, and maybe somebody can jump in on whatever they want to. Special ed, that's obviously something close to my heart. How will that work in the hybrid and online models? Internet and device. I already saw a question pop up on our chat about internet. I was wondering the same thing, and even more to the point of like devices. I know we talked about potentially purchasing and getting enough devices to be able to give everyone something, but I don't remember voting on that yet. So I'm assuming we don't have enough devices, and maybe we do, and I just don't know that. So will we have enough devices to give everyone, especially even if we go to the hybrid model? That means that every single student needs a device of some sort for those days when they're not in class. I would assume, at least that's how I interpret it. Then the internet, I know we have the hotspots at the schools. I heard rumors those weren't the best. Maybe they've gotten better, but even then, as we talk about littles, the littles aren't going to be able to drive their car to a hotspot and sit in the parking lot and do their homework. And we've got 50%, I think, around that, free and reduced lunches. So most of those people probably can't even provide or supply internet for their families as well. And then my last, almost just cheeky comment. I noticed in the Return to Learn, we talked about having families screening for health at home. And I personally think that is laughable at best. If we think that parents are actually going to be doing temp checks at home every single morning, that's not going to happen. And if we believe that parents aren't going to lie, and I don't maybe say lie, that's a harsh word, but at least not be honest, because I know many of us are blessed. Some of us are blessed with jobs that we can take time off as needed and work from home, but there are many people in our district that if you miss work and you don't have vacation time, and just because your child has 101 temperature, it doesn't matter, and they could be losing their jobs over that. So they're going to send them to school and hope that they don't get caught and they don't actually have corona. And so, yeah, I think we need to be temping at the schools. I don't know the best practice for that either, but I mean, that's what they do. I walked into a business. Oh, it was Perfect Games in Ames, and they're temperature checking everyone walking in the door at Perfect Games. You'd see that at every hospital. So I just think that's something that almost needs to be required at the school as well. So that's a lot of those random thoughts, and y'all can jump in wherever.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the temping, because that was a question that several districts in Boone County had at the public health meeting. So I'm going to let Dr. Malhouse share the Boone County Health Department's response and advice to us.
Yes. First, temperature checking is kind of going out of the recommendations from a state and federal level for a couple of reasons. Number one, over half the people with COVID-19 don't have a fever the first few days. So it really doesn't do a whole heck of a lot of good. And number two is in the summertime, by noon, if I were to check temperature of everyone walking into the building, it's probably going to be 99.5 to 100.5 very easily because of the warm air outside. So basically right now, we are not recommending temperature checks from a state level and federal level. What we are recommending is survey questions, such as, have you been around anyone that's been exposed, that's had COVID-19 recently? Have you had a fever, new onset cough, shortness of breath, abnormal or decreased sensation of smell or taste, or nausea or vomiting? If they answer yes to those questions, those are the kids that should be further investigated. I believe if you look at the information, the flow chart we got from the state last Thursday, that was from the Department of Public Health and the Department of Education. It talks about screening kids, and it talks about, I believe, new onset cough or shortness of breath. Those kids should automatically be sent home and need to be evaluated by a physician to either be tested for COVID, and they can come back if that COVID test comes back negative, which is going to be a 2-day test to get it back, or if there's another valid reason, such as the kid's got asthma and was playing in the hay mound last night and his asthma kicked in from the hay. But they're going to need a doctor's note on that. Those who have 2 or more of several other symptoms, and off the top of my head, I cannot list them all. I believe it's nausea, vomiting, runny nose, cough, fever. If you got 2 or more of those 2 should be isolated and sent home and receive a physician clearance to go back to school. And part of that is the FBA febrile for 24 hours time period. So that would be probably the screening protocol. And I think a lot of those questions are probably going to be asked either at the front door, which is going to be pretty hard. If you ask them all at the front door, you're going to get a lot of kids backed up, congested, and not having any good social distancing. So we're probably going to end up having to ask that type of question. Administration is going to have to figure out some other place to do that, perhaps in the hall outside the room or something. But that's going to be, I'm going to turn that over to the administration to figure out the logistics.
Okay, so we also have discussed and have plans for students that aren't feeling well, that are exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms, that it will be a separate area also from our nurses area. So we are not intermixing COVID-19 symptoms with non-COVID-19 symptoms to the best of our abilities. So we have identified those areas in each of the buildings so that we can ensure that if we have a student who exhibits symptoms and ultimately is identified as positive, we have not then exposed other students who were maybe in the nurse's office to that individual. So that's something that we have also been addressing with regard to that. With regard to the technology, any student that needs a device, we have devices for them. That will be addressed quite easily because we have plenty of devices. What we had wanted was new devices, and that, you're right, Joey, we have not brought a bid to you yet for the new devices, but we have plenty of devices. They're just older, but they will do the job. They'll do what they need to do. And then we have also identified through our surveys, so obviously, we have 600 students that haven't been identified through the survey, but of those that responded, we do have families that have stated that they may have difficulties, and we'll work with those individual families to meet the needs of the students. So that's how we're addressing the technology pieces. You're going to have to remind me what happened before it's technology, though.
Failing online, kids are having problems struggling on the online.
So that's one of the reasons why we have staff members, teachers that are actually conducting that online instruction. Same thing that we would do if they were on site. Honestly, you'd be working with the student and the family to help ensure that they're performing better. And I see that as a very individualized answer. Honestly, I don't know that I can say that this is what's going to happen for every child that's failing, because that so-called failure could be a variety of reasons. And so I don't think it's a one-stop shop kind of answer, but will have staff members that are engaging with those students. And if we have students that aren't attending, that's a truancy issue, just like it would be if it was on site. And we would follow procedures to ensure that we could find out where they were if they had signed on for online, because we're taking attendance. That's a requirement. It's part of the schooling. So that's how we would address that. What else did we have? Special ed. So special education is something that we did even when it was voluntary. That's something we need to provide FAPE, but a free and appropriate education for our students, and that's an IEP team decision on what that would look like. So special education teachers would be bringing together for those that are choosing the online option, or if we're in a hybrid option, to determine what the needs of those special education students are, to determine the modifications and adaptations based on the model of education that they're going to be working with. So that's something that has actually been a great support to us. Is the Department of Education has been providing weekly webinars with regard specifically to special education and how best to meet the needs in our state with regard to students who have those needs. So I think we're very well prepared for that, because that's an IP team decision and it's very individualized. Here's something else. That was it? Did I miss something, Joey?
I'm trying to remember now myself. I think if it pops back in,
Okay.
I dumped a lot, so.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you for those very good questions. I'm going to ask Mrs. Stephen, I've not heard much from you. If you have any questions.
I've asked my one question. I do have a prepared comment that I'm ready to make whenever you're ready for that.
Okay, let's hold off for just a couple minutes. I'd like to make sure if there's any further discussion. Jeremy?
Yeah, I was wondering if there was a possibility of delaying the start date of school or front loading our schedule with some PD days with COVID preparations and also the high school going to standards-based grading. It seems like a lot to take on. Has that been discussed, and is that a possibility, or what's your opinion on that?
I am really glad you asked that question, because we would like to put a public hearing on our calendar as well as an action item on Monday's agenda for exactly that. So we have thought about the fact that we will need to front load. Our thought process right now is that we would like to move the start of school back 5 days. We have a PD day that is listed at the end of the school year currently that we would simply move to the front, and then add 4 days at the end of the school year. And I believe that puts us at June 4th as the last day of school. So that would be what our proposal would be, that we would want the public hearing with regard to the calendar on Monday, so that we can do exactly what you talked about, make sure our mitigation strategies are in place, make sure that we've had an opportunity to work with our teachers and our staff. We were having conversations this week about the fact that our new teachers were supposed to join us 5 days after the end of our online deadline. So to not know, I mean, we have redone master schedules at least 3 times in all the buildings, and we're going to have to redo the master schedule once we know how many students are selecting the online option, and also with regard to the decision that happens tonight. So having 5 extra days would be extremely beneficial to us.
And that professional development day originally on our calendar was scheduled for May 31st. So it was a professional development day at the end of the school year. We would turn that into an instructional day, and we've already adapted our calendar to add an extra 2-hour release each month. And so those extra professional development hours are now just sprinkled throughout our calendar. So we feel like we could turn that into an instructional day at the beginning of the year and then not have to make up that other instructional day. There'd be 4 days to make up at the end of the year because they got an extra day at the beginning, and that professional development now becomes throughout the school year instead of as a day at the end.
And I'm assuming that that would be fine. We've talked to our union officials for our teachers and our support staff to make sure that we don't get into any trouble with those contracts. I can't remember off the top of my head if there's.
It will not be a problem with contracts, but quite honestly, this is something that we discussed at length today. And so that's why we were asking for it to be put on the agenda for Monday. And absolutely, we would be communicating with our faculty to make sure that that's something that's agreeable. But I do know that when we had some meetings earlier this week, that was something that was asked of us as administration from our faculty, that they would very much appreciate having some extra time.
Our district lead learning team, and I know that that was a hot topic with our high school lead learning team.
Okay, I guess that just goes to show you the example of how fluid this situation is and how that, well, we're going to make one major decision from the 10,000 foot level here in the next 10 or 15 minutes. There's a lot of decisions at the 1,000 foot, 5,000 foot, 500 feet, 10 feet that are still to be made and may change in this process. So, Mr. Pritchard, do you have any other questions? Okay, Dr. Nystrom, any other questions?
It just occurred to me we haven't talked about what the teachers will be provided with as far as masks, face shields, that kind of thing. And I'm taking it that they will be, but
yes, all staff are going to be provided both face masks and face shields, so they can use both or either or, depending on the situation.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Hearing no other questions, we're going to go around and let each board member make a final statement, and then I'll entertain a motion here. I think I'm just going to go around here. We'll start with Pam. Dr. Nystrom.
Okay, I have to pull it up here. Okay, I have a short, I timed myself. It should be about 1.5 minutes. But last year at this time, I was filling out paperwork to run for the school board. And I had 4 reasons that I thought were very important. Number 1, the hiring of the new superintendent. Number 2, the need for a new elementary early childhood building. Number 3, the fact that in my family, there were 10 children who would be attending Boone schools for many, many years. And number 4, to support Boone educators by ensuring that they had what they needed to meet their highest potential when serving our kids. I had no idea that the most important thing would be confronting an illness that spreads from person to person in many ways and can be so serious to so many. We see and hear statements like we're all in this together, yet many do exactly as they want, as though there were not 3,000 to 4,000 new cases in Iowa of this illness every week for the past few weeks. I have many concerns. My role on the school board is to help make decisions that affect hundreds and hundreds of people. I taught and was an administrator for 25 years in Boone. And after I retired, I subbed for 6 years until becoming a board member. So I know the challenges educators face, but this challenge is different. This situation is very different. I think of a poster I had in my classroom for years. It said, what is right may not be popular, and what is popular may not be right. I couple this with another saying, some will want to do what is easiest, but it may not be the best. And these are the ideals that have helped shape my decision-making as a board member. This is a difficult decision tonight, and I have said my piece.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nystrom. Next, Mr. Weber.
Wow. Well, I already know Pat has a prepared one and Pam had a prepared one, so I feel a little unprepared. I'm just gonna shoot from the hip like I usually do. Yeah, there's no right answer to what we should do here. I mean, we're continuing to watch the chat on the screen here. I'm continuing to get text messages. The questions are unending, and some of them are at the micro level, some of them are at the macro level. And so again, we'll say it, I know we've said it in other meetings, and I'll say it again here, like a lot of these questions, Brad Winter, you're doing an incredible job of answering them as best as possible. So thank you for that. And that just goes to show, like, these administrators are the ones at the ground level. Y'all are texting us, emailing us, calling us, and we're the ones making the decision here. So I understand that. But some of these specific questions need to be sent to your administrators and asked specifically of them. Because I don't know a lot of these questions and a lot of these answers. I don't, and I won't potentially. And so trust your administrators. And so from what I've heard so far, I heard that our administrators as a collective agree with and the recommendation from Julie of going either all online or all in person, not having the hybrid model. And so my heart wants to align with our administrators. I want to support them as best as possible, because they're the ones making the really hard decisions on a day-to-day basis. And I've always been told that my role as a school board member is to support our administrators. And so that's going to be where I tend to go. I mean, maybe we're going to talk some more out here, but I want to support you administrators and the choices that you make and the work that you've been putting into all of this over the past several months. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Weber. I'm gonna go with Mr. Pritchard. I'm gonna save our board vice president for second to last, and then I'll go last.
First, I'd like to thank the community. The responses have been overwhelming, and all the personal phone calls, emails, people stopping into the shop. Everybody's concerned, and I appreciate that, but the mentality has been collaborative and supportive. I've gotten a lot of very supportive emails, and I appreciate that we're trying to tackle this as a community, as opposed to individuals. I think that's going to help us in the long run. As far as my personal beliefs, I don't think that it's a one-size-fits-all approach. I don't think what's best for one building is what's going to be best for the other. I've talked to a lot of people that I trust, and I understand the need for a district-wide approach, and that's unfortunate in some cases, but it has some advantages. And I think that's why I'm going to base my decision on what I think is best for the majority of students, knowing fully that it may not be best for every student. That's difficult for me to swallow, but that's the reality that we're in right now. And so that's how I'm going to justify my vote tonight.
Too fast for me. Okay, Mrs. Teben.
Well, my comments are a little bit longer, so please bear with me as I go through them. I prefer not to have to make this decision at all, but COVID-19 has meant things have to change. This is a serious disease that is affecting everyone. I've heard the reasons from the experts why kids need to be back in school, and I understand. Schools undoubtedly provide a safety net for some of our most vulnerable students and an opportunity for social interaction that they obviously cannot receive at home. However, that safety net would be rendered completely ineffective if our students and school staff are back in session full-time, face-to-face across our district during this pandemic. Families rely on schools to provide a safe environment for their children. At present, we cannot guarantee the physical safety of our students in a full-time, face-to-face model, and for that reason, I cannot support a district-wide return to such a model. The first parent survey the district conducted showed a majority of the parents at the high school level want full-time over hybrid, a difference of about 8.6%, but I believe they want to do it safely. Again, I understand the desire for things to return to normal. The reality of our situation right now, though, is that things cannot return to normal. It is true that some studies show that children have a smaller risk of contacting COVID-19 or exhibiting symptoms. It is less clear to what extent kids can transmit the disease to others, and other studies report that kids over the age of 13 are more likely to be contagious and pass the virus on to parents, grandparents, teachers, and neighbors. My concern is not only for the safety of our students in our district, but for our entire community. The numbers in Iowa are not going down. If the numbers were even up below 100 daily statewide, I might feel differently. I've had many sleepless nights trying to determine what is best for the health and well-being of both our students and our teachers. I feel we need a hybrid plan for at least the high school and preferably the middle school. At the elementary level, it is easier and more feasible to maintain smaller cohorts with a single classroom that reduce the amount of contact with others that students have. If similar cohorts of the classroom level could be arranged for 5 through 8 students at the middle school, I would support that arrangement. Implementing cohorts is much more difficult for high school students. We also cannot meet CDC guidelines for social distancing in secondary classrooms if all of our students are on campus at the same time. Classrooms are simply not big enough. A hybrid plan for our secondary students would make it easier to perform contact tracing when, not if, a student tests positive and can help stop the spread. It would also reduce the number of students in a classroom at a given time and allow for the greater use of social distancing. Furthermore, all of our 512 students have devices that they can use for remote learning, and I know that our dedicated teaching staff is capable of providing high quality learning experiences through the use of technology. If a hybrid plan can't be implemented for 7th and 8th graders as well, that would be, if it could be implemented, that would be preferred. If not, then smaller cohorts, then grade level needs to be arranged. So my first choice is for face-to-face for pre-K-12 with smaller cohorts than grade level for 5 through 6 and hybrid for 7 through 12. My second choice is face-to-face for pre-K-8 with smaller cohorts than grade level and hybrid for 9 through 12. I really don't have a third choice, especially when lives are potentially at stake. If there is a chance to save even one life, I cannot in good conscience vote for full-time, face-to-face, district-wide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Stephen. I guess I'm gonna go last. I've got 2 different viewpoints on this, in that I get the viewpoint 8 to 5 from a public health standpoint as a practicing physician in the community. And in the evenings, I'm reading medical literature on this all the time, along with how it affects education, pediatrics, adults. American Academy of Pediatrics came out in favor of return to school very adamantly. I've talked to pediatricians, other family physicians. This has been a topic of discussion at medical staff meetings on Monday noons for the last few weeks. So it has been bantered about. Our first goal is to provide education to these students. Second goal, safety of our staff and faculty. When I look at this, I came on the board, I felt we need to be supporting our administration if possible, unless we could find some valid reasons not to support an administrative decision. That's what I've looked at over the last several years. When I look at our recommendations, I find them to be very valid and reasonable given the literature. I have some concerns about a hybrid model in the middle school and the high school. First is, if we have kids here every other day, what are those kids doing on the other day they're not in school? I'm afraid it might be just as dangerous not to have those kids in school, because while 10 or 20% of them are going, or 30% of them are going to properly sit home, do their work on the computer, on the internet, socially isolate themselves, and be fine. The other 50 to 60%, I'm afraid they're going to be out and about. And what's going to happen is that one day everyone's going to say, okay, we're all going to meet at Joey's house at 9 o'clock. We'll use his internet for the day. Another day, we're all going to meet at Julie's house, and we're going to use her internet for the day. They're not going to be practicing any social distancing. They're not going to be having any masks on. And they're going to be at more risk for bringing the virus in, as opposed to having them contained in our school on a daily basis. So therefore, the hybrid model, I don't know it's going to be working. Ivory Tower, everyone follows it when they're at home. Yes. In reality, I don't think so. So that's one reason I can't vote for the hybrid model. Secondly is, if I have a hybrid model in high school, how do I justify athletics every night practicing and extracurricular activities every night practicing? I know that the Iowa High School Athletic Association and Iowa Girls Union has come out with some recommendations, but bottom line is football is a game of contact. Linemen have to be hitting each other, pushing against each other. That's part of the game. Wide receivers, maybe not quite as much. Volleyball, they're close to that net. Music, drama, stage. We got issues there. So if we let them practice every night, yet we don't let them in school except every other day, that just is counterintuitive to me. So that is another one reason why I would lean against the hybrid. The third reason is that we have several students who learn best by in-person, everyday contact with teachers. And if we go the hybrid option, those students do not have an option. They're only going to get their education every other day. They're not going to be able to understand, be able to provide the direction that our teaching staff does in the room every day. And so those kids are going to fall behind. If I go and say we're in class every day, those students who or parents who feel that they can't feel safe in that, they have an option. That is the full-time online option. Those former kids do not have that option if we have a hybrid campus model. So those are the three reasons that I am reluctant to support any hybrid model. I understand the risk. I look at the literature every day. There's literature that's good, there's literature that's average, and there's Dr. Facebook and Dr. Google. So it's hard to find proper information. I understand that. I also feel that we got a survey with over 2/3 of student parents replying. They want in person. Majority of those on person want in person every day. And our administration, I feel I need to support our administration on this. And so that I will end my comments. Now, I'll entertain a motion. Or further discussion, if one of us stimulates someone else's thoughts.
That, I would move that we do a hybrid for 9-12, face-to-face for others, but smaller cohorts at the middle school level than grade level.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Mrs. Teban has moved to go to hybrid at the high school on campus and to in-person or every day for pre-K through 8. Motion has been seconded by Dr. Nystrom. I'm going to ask for a voice vote, or correction, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on this issue. Is there any discussion before we have this vote?
Can I make a comment
Yes.
about that? So one of
the pieces of that motion required a smaller cohort
with
with
regard
regard to
the
middle school being
lesser than grade level. And at this point, we don't know that we can guarantee the cohorts being smaller than that for 100% of the day. And I would not want to enter into a motion that we have not been able to find the solution to meet that requirement. So that is just something that I think we need to say from the start.
Okay, I can move to amend the motion that the school look at the possibility of changing from the grade level approach to smaller cohorts.
Okay, is there a second to that amendment?
I would ask Julie to restate that again, please.
So
when you talk about
the cohorts, you're talking about 100% of the day in those cohorts. So, for example, at the middle school level, you have staff members that teach 4 grade levels in the areas of art, music, PE, several of those pieces. And to maintain 20 to 25 in all of those classes, we have not found that solution as of this time. And so that's what I'm saying is we're trying to be very transparent when we've shared mitigation strategies that are occurring at each of the building levels. And that's why we stated they were currently grade level cohorts, because we don't want to mislead anyone into believing that 100% of the day would be in the smaller cohorts. While we could do a lot of smaller cohort work within the classrooms, we cannot guarantee that the same 20 to 25 students can move about the middle school level throughout the entire day. And we have enlisted our colleagues across the state in trying to accomplish that task and have not been able to find a middle school that has been anywhere in the size range of our school district that has been able to accomplish that task. So it's not that we're trying to come up with these solutions alone. We have reached out to engage our colleagues in finding out the different ideas on how to accomplish those tasks. But I think it's just really important that we're very transparent about what we feel we can guarantee to our parents and our staff and students. So that's why I wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you for that clarification. There's been a motion, there's an amendment to the motion out. I need a second to the amendment first.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay. There is a amendment to the motion on the floor. We therefore have to vote first on the amendment to the motion. So is there any discussion based only on the amendment now, and then we'll go back to discussion on the full motion. There are no further discussion. The amendment on the floor at this time is to change the language to have the district look at the possibility of smaller cohorts at the middle school level. Is that your motion, your amendment, Mrs. Stevens?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Hearing no further discussion, I will call for a roll call vote on just the amendment itself.
Weber,
Yes to the amendment.
Nystrom,
Yes.
Teven,
Yes.
Pritchard,
Yes.
Millhouse,
No. Okay, we now have the original motion, which is to have a hybrid model for the campus model at the high school, along with a full-time everyday on campus pre-K through 8, with the stipulation that the board would ask the administration to look at making the cohorts at the middle school smaller. Now we go back to discussion on this motion as amended.
Ask the question.
Yes.
Well, if we
Attempt to do so and we're not able to get 100% of the day in the smaller cohort,
then
then
what
what
happens?
happens?
I would assume the way this motion is made is that we would proceed with still going for all day from pre-K through 8 every day. Would be my interpretation of this motion.
Yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Call for the question.
Okay, the question has been called. Although we're going to ask for a roll call vote on this motion, does anyone need the motion repeated?
Yes, just to clarify.
The motion is that we go to a hybrid model at the high school, and that we go to a all day, every day on campus at the pre-K 8 level, and the board requests that the administration look into making the cohorts at the middle school small. Okay, Mr. Lewis, would you please call the roll?
Weber,
No.
Teven,
Yes.
Nystrom,
Yes.
Pritchard,
No.
Millhouse,
No. Okay, the motion fails 3-2. Further discussion?
I'd make a motion.
Okay, Mr. Pritchard?
With reluctance, I would move that we accept the guidance of our superintendent, administrators, American Society of Pediatrics, Department of Education, and the Board of Public Health to go back to school full-time this fall.
For all grades.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Pritchard, seconded by, I believe Mr. Weber, you seconded that, didn't you?
Yep, second.
To go back to full-time, everyone in the classroom every day for the on-campus option. Further discussion on this motion?
Yes, Brian, I would like to make a couple comments.
Yes.
As we move into this situation, it is not that I don't appreciate or value all the hard work that's been done, but I think we needed to discuss all the opportunities pretty fully, because there are concerns about the number of students in classrooms. There are concerns about the number of students in buildings. And I will certainly support our staff as we go into this situation. You know, I was glad to hear that a discussion point might be extending some time before we start school, so staff have an opportunity to do things. So they have an opportunity to prepare themselves for basically for the unknown. And that's what this is all about. It's all about the unknown. There's no right answer. I think Joey made that comment early in this meeting. We all care a great deal for the teachers and the students in our district. And I will certainly abide by this decision and help as much as I can. But it was a very difficult decision to make. And I wish there was a better way to do this.
I'd also like to say again that I appreciate what everybody has been doing and what the parents want. I just have to vote my conscience.
I will say that this is an extremely tough issue. And as I said earlier, we're not going to be able to make everyone happy. Ideally, we would have a whole bunch of rooms and more teachers, and we could spread everyone out 6 foot apart, smaller classrooms, all be isolated into cohorts all day, and it would be perfect. That is not the environment we have, unfortunately. We're just going to have to make the best of it. We may be coming back to make changes. In fact, I know that there's going to be some changes. They might not come to the board level, but they're definitely going to come to the administrative level on this. The administration is going to be keeping us up to date. And again, I appreciate everyone's work on this. Administration, the faculty that have come back and volunteered their hours, our board members who've all done a lot of reading, listened to numerous phone calls, read numerous emails, text messages. It's not an easy decision. Further discussion on this topic.
Yeah, I'll just comment, and I mean, I think I said it, but I'll say it again. I joined the school board with the desire to support our administrators. That was one of my #1 goals, and so I am voting to support our superintendent, our new superintendent. I am voting to support the administrators, and at least what has been told to me that this is what the administrators are desiring and feel is best. I think Jeremy worded it best in his motion that we're doing this reluctantly, but at the advice of our administrators, our superintendent, the pediatric, the board of like all of these. Nothing. We haven't left any rock unturned. And so, and I do also say it knowing that there is options still. It's not like we're throwing 2,000 kids into the lion's den. We are providing an online option for those that have concerns and have issues. I feel like from this moment on now, for the rest of this school year, through this pandemic, it is vitally important for us to have a united front. I'm pretty clear that this is not going to be a unanimous vote that we've had every other time when we have voted since I joined the board, and that's just been nice, but it's not always going to happen. So I think it's vitally important for us to have a united front moving forward, to be positive around our grandkids, our kids, for their own mental health, for their spiritual health, for their health as a whole. I think it's just vitally important for us all to do that and to support one another through all of this. So yeah, those are my closing thoughts.
Okay.
I would just like to reiterate
reiterate where our recommendation came from again.
I just want to reiterate that we based our recommendation on the survey results that we received from both the staff and from the community. And I have repeatedly stated how appreciative I am of that input, because we base our decisions on a multitude of things. And most importantly, it's important that we hear from our community and our teachers. We also said at the beginning of this that we also recognize that not everyone's going to be happy with the decision. And as the board members have already shared, this is an extremely difficult decision, not easily arrived at from the administration either. But we are relying on Iowa Department of Public Health, the Department of Education, our families, and our staff to help guide those decisions. And that's where our decision has come from.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments before I call for a vote? Could you unmute and make this?
Just wondering if it was worth looking through the chat comments one more time to see if there's anything that needs to be addressed, or are we beyond the time for public
I think
input?
we're beyond the time for that, because that was a public comment earlier, and I looked on him earlier, and Mr. Winter is doing a yeoman's job over there. I think a couple of other of our administrators have been pitching on into. I've seen some comments from some others, which I really appreciate, again, the hard work these people are doing day in, day out. Okay, and Mr. Lewis will be saving those and posting those later too. So with that being said, I'm gonna call for a roll call vote at this time. Mr. Lewis, please.
Weber. Teben.
I will work with you all to the best of my ability, but no.
Nystrom.
In solidarity and support for our administration, and knowing that we will be looking for consistency, I will vote yes.
Pritchard.
Yes.
Melhouse.
Milhouse, yes. The motion does pass 4-1. With that being said, I believe that is the last item on our agenda. Again, I want to thank everyone for this valuable discussion. I know it's not an easy answer. Not everyone's going to be happy. We as a board and as administration need to work together as a team to support our teachers and our educators to provide the best possible education for our kids while ensuring the safety of our students and our teachers. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Pritchard, seconded by Mr. Reverend Weber to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. I'd like to thank everyone. I'd also like to thank our IT staff for coming in and making sure that you're able to do this Zoom meeting. I'd like to thank all the people online that have listened, provide us comments in the chat room. We appreciate all your support. Go Toradors. We're going to get through this together as a team. And thank you very much.